Hello, and thank you for watching this October 2018 Weather Outlook, brought to you by Farm Credit Illinois. My name is Eric Snodgrass, and I'm a Senior Atmospheric Scientist and co-founder of Agrible Incorporated. Well, what I want to start off with is taking a look here at U.S. corn yields from 1960 to 2018, and I want you to focus right there. What do we see? We see that over the last 6 years, from 2013 to 2018, we have had near average or above average yields for corn. And much of that national above-average trend has been because of Illinois agriculture. We have been leading the nation in production. Let me show you what I mean here. This is a really cool figure. What it shows you is for 2017, county-level corn production versus yield. So on the y-axis over here, we have yield in bushels per acre, and on the x-axis, we have production in total number of bushels expressed in millions of bushels. Now, each of those gray circles you see there is a different U.S. county. And I've filled in black the Illinois counties. What do we have? Well, we fill out the top and the far right-hand side of this distribution, meaning we have some of the most productive counties in the country. And when they make yields, the whole country makes yields. Let me show it to you another way. This is a really cool figure as well. On the top, I have a histogram, a distribution of U.S. county-level corn yields from 2017. And this dashed line right here in the middle represents the 2017 average of about 176 bushel an acre. Now, on the bottom, I have just the Illinois counties. And what do you see? You see that the Illinois counties contribute to the right-hand side of the distribution. What does this boil down to? If Illinois doesn't make its yields on corn or soybeans, the country suffers below average yields. We are extremely important to that. So let's kind of walk you through the 2018 growing season, and then we'll get into a forecast for the upcoming fall and winter. Now, this season started off cold. We had our second coldest April on record. And a lot of folks were wondering, when are we ever going to get to these fields? When are the soil temperatures going to come up? When you look at this scatter plot over here on the right, it shows you that the only year that was colder than 2018 for April was 1907. It was also quite dry. We had our 24th driest April on record. Well, from April to May, we saw the largest pattern shift I've ever observed in terms of temperatures. We went from having our second coldest April to our warmest May on record. And it also got relatively dry, and we saw planting efforts take off across the middle part of this country, especially here in Illinois. Now, to show you how fast we planted this crop, check out this next figure. While much of the country was lagging behind our 5-year average in corn planting progress, as soon as the weather broke in late April, early May, and we started to see those warmer temperatures, look at this. Illinois planted 70% of its corn crop. That's 11.2 million acres, 70% of 11.2 million acres in 2 weeks. That's a planting pace of 390 acres per minute. And we destroyed the competition in terms of our planting progress. It was amazing to see how quickly we were able to plant this crop. Now, as the season progressed, one of the major things we saw was that we were rapidly accumulating growing degree day units. So when you look at this map, we see that by the time we got to the middle of August, parts of the middle section of this country were nearly 400 growing degree day units ahead of average. That meant that this crop finished probably 2 to 2.5 weeks early compared to normal. Now, where were we getting all of this heat? Well, we were getting it primarily with warm overnight temperatures. You see, when we calculate growing degree day units, we use a base of 50 and a max of 86. So these warm overnight temperatures, like we saw in May being the warmest minimum temperature on the 124-year record, and then June being the third warmest, well, we were accumulating a lot of heat overnight, but not necessarily in extreme daytime temperatures. In fact, we avoided them. Just to show you this, look at July. You know, July is an incredibly important month for corn pollination. It was our 54th warmest, which was right on average. And as a consequence, with a lack of extreme heat in July and then plenty of precipitation, we should have expected massive yields for not only the state of Illinois, but all of the Corn Belt. What helped us all along? Take a look at the figure that's over there on the left. That shows you precipitation expresses a percent of normal from April 24th all the way to August 19th. And wherever you see the white to blue colors, that's where it was near average to wetter than average. And where you see the red colors, that's where it was drier than average. Where was drought the worst? In parts of northern Missouri. But you can see here that we did have some dry pockets that extended from western Illinois over toward kind of the Kankakee area. Outside of that, though, the rest of the Corn Belt, which we can define by looking over here at this image in the bottom right, which shows you a circle inside of each county relative to its production. Well, the Corn Belt is defined right in through here. When you kind of look at that same area, it had a lot of wetter than average conditions, and that rain was making grain. So when we hear this huge number coming out from the USDA, a lack of heat stress and plenty of precipitation is what pushed us to these record numbers. And Illinois right now is projected to have a 214 bushel per acre crop, which is the largest ever when it comes to corn. Okay, over the last 60 days, things have changed quite a bit. We've had some major hurricanes making landfall, like Florence, absolutely just dumping rain in parts of North Carolina and South Carolina. We had Gordon before that came right up here into the panhandle of Florida before going over to the mid-Mississippi River Valley and then dumping rain on the eastern Corn Belt. As of this recording, late in the night on the 9th of October, early morning of the 10th actually, we had Category 3 strength Michael, that was going to slam into the Florida panhandle and go right here into parts of Georgia and South Carolina, dumping a lot of rain. So the eastern part of the United States wet. The western part of the United States very dry. Look at the central states though. We have featured this flow pattern. There's been a big dominating ridge sitting over the southeast, and around it, the flow of the atmosphere has been just like this, bringing up an enormous amount of Gulf moisture that's ridden up on this stationary boundary, producing some very, very heavy late-season rainfall. And that has really prevented a lot of the harvest of this crop. But in parts of central Illinois and southern Illinois, things have been much closer to average, and therefore harvest progress has been, for the most part, doing pretty well there. But in northern Illinois, and certainly getting into Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, getting back into parts of Kansas, Nebraska, things have been very, very wet, preventing a lot of normal harvest pace. So, as we get into the forecast, what are we dealing with? Well, this animation shows you what the weather conditions were doing early in the morning on October 10th. We, of course, have Hurricane Michael bearing down there on parts of Florida, eventually going to parts of Georgia and South Carolina. But this massive low-pressure system you see spinning up right here is what will be ushering in some big time changes in our weather patterns. You see, through much of the beginning of October, Illinois has enjoyed much warmer than average temperatures, especially the southern two-thirds of the state. But this big low-pressure system, which will bring in a severe weather threat through parts of Illinois in the day on Wednesday into Thursday, will also be ushering in much, much colder temperatures. Because right now on the backside of this low here, we're actually getting snow out of the system. So here we go. This is what the forecast looks like in the coming 15 days. So let me get you through about the fourth week of October here. You see, up until this point, the flow of the jet stream has featured a big ridge in the Gulf of Alaska, a deep trough over the western United States, and a large ridge over the east. And it's been this ridge that's dominated that warmer pattern we've seen here, and also all of the flow of that Gulf of Mexico moisture riding up on that boundary to show you that's been quite wet. Well, what we're going to see is this ridge and this ridge are going to move east. And that means this deeper trough that you see here, this upper level trough, is finally going to slide into the Midwest, and that's going to bring in a substantial temperature change. So let me erase my drawings here and show you exactly where we're going with this one. Watch as that trough finally occupies the middle part of the country and eastern part of the country. And as we move toward the end of the month of October, this is the new setup. We now feature a deeper trough kind of sitting right over here in the Gulf of Alaska, with a ridge building out west and a deeper trough over the eastern part of the country. What does this mean in terms of temperatures? Well, let me show you a 5-day sliding window of temperatures that's going to start off right now, taking us through Sunday the 14th. It's going to slide all the way until October 24th. What you see here is much cooler than average weather occupying the Corn Belt and Illinois. We will probably be seeing at the end of this second week of the month of October our first frost coming into the northern half of the state. So we'll have to watch that very carefully for Friday and Saturday at the end of this week. So that's the pattern change, and it is here, and it looks like it's going to stick around at least through the end of the month of October. Now, as we stretch this out and look at precipitation, I want to show you a map. Now, this map looks at the next 15 days of precipitation anomalies. You can clearly see the influence of Michael, and here comes Sergio over towards Texas. But all of that rain that's coming through the Corn Belt right now, when we average it out over the next 15 days, well, you can see here that things look near average, maybe even drier than average in parts of Illinois. And that's because after that big low pressure system, the one you saw spinning up like this, gets through, higher pressure slides in out of Canada And that's going to provide, well, a much drier pattern. So it looks as though after all of the heavy precipitation we're going to deal with this big low pressure system, things might dry out in the next 15 days or so. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be any precipitation. It just means a drier pattern than what we've seen for the beginning part of October. Moving forward, let's look at the major players for fall and winter. You see, when we talk about long-range weather predictions, some of the big features we have to watch out for are major changes in global sea surface temperature patterns. Now, remember this about long-range forecasting. It's really speculative. We look at some of these big pattern adjustments, we look at some of these major drivers, but in reality, weather is always volatile in the state of Illinois. Well, what am I looking at? I'm looking at this. What you see there is over this winter, we are projecting a weak, what we call Modoki El Nino. Now, what is a Modoki El Nino? Well, you know that El Ninos are when the ocean temperatures out here in the Central Pacific are warmer than normal. Full-blown El Ninos are not only very warm in that area, but that warm water also extends way down here over toward South America. We don't have that this year. You see, we have near average to potentially cooler than average water in this area. And when we get a pattern such that we have warm water right here on the equator, but cooler water that's going to hug the west coast of South America, we call that a Modoki El Nino. Now, what do we need to take away from this? Well, let me show you what happened the last time we had one of these Modoki El Ninos. Check it out. On the left, I have the forecast for December, January, and February of this winter for sea surface temperatures. And what do we see? We see this temperature pattern with the cooler waters here. Now, in 2014 to 2015, that winter, we saw a very similar thing. You see, you got the warm water that extends off the west coast into the Baja, with some cooler water sitting here off the west coast of South America. What else did we see? We saw warmer water here in the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, extending into the North Atlantic. And that is also what's forecast right now for this upcoming winter. We also saw some cooler water up here extending from Japan into the North Central Pacific. And we are forecasting something similar to that this year. So when I look back and I try to find a good analog year that might help me understand what winter is going to look like, maybe winter 2014 into 15 is a good analog. Now understand this. Using 1 year as an analog year is not the best idea. But I think that when you combine that analog year with what some of our long-range dynamical models are forecasting, it may feature a warmer western United States with a cooler eastern United States, with Illinois being right somewhere in the middle of all of this. Now, how do you interpret that? Well, winter in Illinois is volatile no matter what. But I would tell you that this year we probably have a lesser chance of being on the extreme side of warm or cool. I think that along the East Coast, it will be a cooler winter, and along the West Coast, it'll be warmer. But we're probably going to be right there in the battleground as we normally are. Now, where does this probably play a bigger role when it comes to understanding weather's impact on agriculture? It's not for Illinois, it's for South America. And right now, the current long-range projections for precipitation in South America look like this. That map over there on the left, this is looking at the late fall, early winter precipitation patterns forecast for South America. And what do we see? We may potentially see some drier conditions up in the Amazon. More importantly, though, when you look at October, November, December, and January, that's what I've got shown for you over here in these 4 panels as forecast by the European model. Most of them, I'll just point out December here, are picking up on a wet southern Brazil and Argentina pattern. And that's in stark contrast to a year ago when La Nina dominated the Central Pacific and they had drought in that area. We don't see at this point a strong signal either way for Brazil's major growing regions in terms of precipitation, which means what we're going to have to do is watch it week by week to understand how weather patterns are going to unfold in Brazil. But I will tell you this about Brazil. Right now, we've seen very rapid expansion of the number of acres in Brazil's major growing region, especially in the northern growing region encroaching on the Amazon rainforest. That animation you're watching over there is some early September deforestation that's happening with slash and burn. They're finding a lot of acres. And because of that, their acreage is increasing exponentially each year. The current projections for Brazilian soybean yields are well above 120 million metric ton, making this the largest crop ever. And even if there are weather stresses throughout the year, throughout this growing season for South America, because of the increase in acreage, even if they take a hit on yields, they're still going to have a very, very large crop. But I'll be watching it very closely throughout this winter and keeping you updated on what I'm expecting to come out of that area. So with that, that's kind of an outlook, at least for what we've seen so far this year, and our outlook for the upcoming fall and winter. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this forecast video. We at Farm Credit Illinois thank you for watching. Hope you look forward to our next update coming out soon. Thank you.